Good morning, everyone. Today it's Wednesday morning, the 15th of December. You know, the word war is mentioned many, many times in the Bible. It's about 8 pages of the term war. We see many, many times that there was war in Israel as they were commanded to go out and to slay the Amalekites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Amorites. And also, another term in the Bible is mentioned frequently, and that is the term warfare. In 2 Corinthians, the 10th chapter of 2 Corinthians, we read in the 4th verse, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds." We're going to look at that chapter this morning because I think it's good instruction for us. Paul starts out and says, "By the meekness and gentleness of Christ, who in presence and base among you, but being absent am bold toward you." Paul refers to himself as being present among them by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. He says, "I beseech you that I may not be bold when I'm present with that confidence wherein I think to be bold against some which think of us as if we had walked according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ." Wow, what a proclamation by Paul. Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought. I must say there's no way that I can bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. How often do we go through our day and all of a sudden something will come into our mind and we'll say, "Where did that come from? Where did that thought come from?" He says, "Having in readiness to revenge all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. Do you look on things after the outward appearance? If any man trust to himself that he is Christ, let him of himself think this again, that he is Christ, even so we are Christ's. For though I should boast somewhat more of our authority, which the Lord hath given us for edification and not for your destruction, I should not be ashamed, that I may not seem as if I would terrify you by letters. For his letters say they are weighty and powerful, but his bodily presence is weak and his speech contemptible. Let such a one think this, that such as we are in word by letters when we are absent, such will we be also indeed when we are present. For we dare not make ourselves of the numbers of compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, that they are measuring themselves by themselves, and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. But we will not boast of things without measure, but according to the measure of the rule which God hath distributed to us a measure to reach even unto you. For we stretch not ourselves beyond our measure, as though we reach not unto you. For we are come as far as to you also in preaching the gospel of Christ, not boasting of things without our measure, that is, of other men's labors, but having hope, when your faith is increased, that we shall be enlarged by you according to our rule abundantly, to preach the gospel in regions beyond you, and not to boast in another man's line of things made ready to our hand. But he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. For not he that commendeth himself is approved, but whom the Lord commendeth. Well, we are told in another place to take on the whole armor of God, that we will be able to withstand in the evil day, to take on the helmet of salvation and the breastplate of righteousness. For we wrestle not against, we wrestle not against but against principalities. Well, we are in a warfare in this life. Now, in the 40th chapter of Isaiah, it tells us that our warfare is accomplished. But in this world that we're living in, we are yet in our flesh. Ephesians 12 says we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Sometimes I feel like I'm wrestling against flesh and blood. But he says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Well, we see that in our world, do we not? Can't we see that we're wrestling against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places? Can't we see that in the day that we're living in? I believe we can. But Paul here says that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. And he says that we should cast down our imaginations and everything that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God. Just think how many times a day we are faced with thoughts that are against the knowledge of God. How our society tries to program us against the knowledge of God. All around us, in education, in the denial of creation, in the exaltation of the creature, in secular humanistic education, in all of this LGBT mess that we hear being thrown at us every day, transgenderism, AI, artificial intelligence, humanistic psychology. casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. What an admonition, what an exhortation. Well, I think it's very timely for today. I'm going to turn this over to Mark and have him read this chapter again. And as he reads through this, think about your daily walk and think about the thoughts that come into your mind and where they're coming from. And we realize that we are wrestling not against flesh and blood, but against principalities.
Second Corinthians chapter 10. Now I, Paul, myself beseech you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ, who in presence and base among you, being absent and bold toward you, but I beseech you that I may not be bold when I am present with that confidence, wherewith I think to be bold against some which think of us as we walk according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God, the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ, having a readiness to avenge all disobedience. And your obedience is fulfilled. Do you look on things after outward appearance? If any man trust himself he is Christ, let him himself think this again. As he is Christ, even so we are Christ. For though I should boast somewhat more of our authority, which the Lord hath given us for edification, not for your destruction, I should not be ashamed. I may not seem as I would terrify you by letters. For his letters say they are weighty and powerful, but this bodily presence is weak, speech contemptible. Let such an one think this, that such as we are dead, we work by letters when we are absent. Such will we do also indeed when we are present, for we dare not make ourselves of the number, or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves. But they measure themselves by themselves, comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise. We will not boast of things without our measure, according to the measure of the rule which God hath distributed us, the measure to reach unto you. For we stretch not ourselves beyond our measure, as though we reach not unto you, for we are come as far as to you also in preaching the gospel of Christ, not boasting of things without our measure, that is of other men's labors, but having hope when your faith is increased, we shall be enlarged by you according to your rule abundantly, to preach the gospel in the regions beyond you, and not to boast in another man's line, things made ready to our hand. He that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. For not he that commendeth himself approved, but whom the Lord commendeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord.
Yep.
Well, the good word for today is to cast down all imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. May God be with you this day. God bless.